Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sonja Agata. Now, as NASA's Artemis 2 program makes its next move toward the moon, Poland is also rapidly expanding its own space presence, with multiple military and civilian satellites now in orbit. Now, the government has committed substantial funding to ESA and national projects like the Camilla Earth Observation Program, signaling ambition in defense and commercial markets alike. And now, to launch ourselves into this topic, we're now joined by our intrepid, our own Sonja Agata Bišćan, TVP World reporter. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's launch into this topic. Artemis 2, many questions, but where are we right now with this mission? Where does this go next?
This is a very exciting moment for the mission because in the early hours of Friday, according to the Central European Summer Time, there was the translunar injection burn. This is a critical moment in the mission because at that point, the Orion spacecraft, which is the spacecraft on board which we have the 4 astronauts of the Artemis 2 mission, it left the Earth's orbit and it is heading straight to the moon. So right now there is no detour. The astronauts spent the first day in the Earth's orbit in order to test out the system, make sure that everything is okay, and they're going further to the moon now. Okay. This is also a very exciting moment for another reason, at least when it comes to European audiences and the European space sector, because at the heart of that very maneuver is European technology. It is the European Service Module. That module provides propulsion, and it burned in that moment of the early hours of the day in order to push the spacecraft towards the moon. So it's an exciting moment both for the mission, but also for European space sector.
Well, it's good. I think also what we're hearing is that this is going to carry these astronauts, I think, the farthest ever anyone's gone. I mean, we've been to the moon, but not quite this far. But that's my question, because if we're looking back at the actual landing back in 1969, that's pretty much 50 years ago, we haven't been back since. So maybe give us a short insight why we haven't been back. What was the holdup?
Okay, so these 2 missions are a little bit different, Apollo and Artemis, but they also bear some similarities. So when we look at the Greek mythology, Artemis is the goddess of the moon, but she is also the twin sister of Apollo. And that is already a first nod towards the achievements that have been made in the area of human space exploration. But then there are also differences. And as you pointed out, we are going to a similar place. We haven't been there for a long time, but we are going further. Now, some say that Artemis 2, which will not land on the moon, but it will circle around it, go furthest that humans have ever been, it bears resemblance, or is an iteration, if you will, of Apollo 8, which had a similar responsibility. It also did not land on the moon. It went around it. It came back. But there are also differences. This is the first use of this hardware. So the rocket that was, the mega rocket that was designed specifically for the Artemis mission, as well as the Orion spacecraft. They have not been used in this scenario with crew on board. So this is the first use of this equipment. This is a test part of the larger mission. And I think that it's also important to highlight that Artemis 2 should not be viewed in isolation from the rest of the Artemis program. Artemis 2, as the name suggests, it's the second launch. We had Artemis 1 in 2022, and it was without the crew. So this was the first test flight. Already from then until now, there have been a number of changes that were implemented in order to enhance this system. Now we are also looking at the developments of Artemis 2 in order to shape the future Artemis missions. Initially, or until recently, Artemis 3 was supposed to land humans on the moon. But now it seems to, the timeline seems to have shifted. We're expecting that this could happen with Artemis 4. But the coming mission, this mission, they're there to test the infrastructure, to test the capabilities in order to ensure a safe moon landing in the years to come, maybe as soon as
I was going to ask when was that?
2027 is the suggested timeline for Artemis 3, which will test the docking system. And then Artemis 4, which could land humans on the moon, is roughly expected in 2028. But I think all of this should be taken with a pinch of salt. Even when I was watching the NASA press conference after the launch, whenever a journalist would ask a question, NASA had an answer, but they said, but keep an eye on updates, because this is a test mission. We're just witnessing what will happen. And another thing that I think is also quite important to highlight as a difference between Apollo and Artemis. Apollo, as I was interviewing various people in the space sector as to what's the difference between these two, they would tell me, well, Apollo was about going to the moon, picking some rocks, and going back. And I think that's perhaps a little bit of an oversimplified explanation of that. I wonder how Neil Armstrong would feel about this interpretation of his work. So let me rephrase that for the purpose. The way that I see it, Apollo was about making a statement. In the words of President John F. Kennedy at the time, we are doing it not because it's easy, we are doing it because it's hard. It was about proving that humans can go to the moon and come back. And if you add to it the thrill of the space race, it was also about who gets there first. Now, with Artemis, this purpose, the objective is a little bit different. And that purpose is also transforming throughout the program. It's transforming with the program. But I think it's safe to say that the purpose of the Artemis program is to create a sustained human presence on the moon. Humans are going to the moon through Artemis in order to explore the resources of the moon, in order to understand our own place in the solar system, and to go further from the moon to Mars and to more distant planets in the future.
But all those, as you said, there are many more missions planned. It's not just this one thing, but I think it's catching attention because it's so significant. But at the same time, looking at, as you mentioned, famous astronauts, I think that, you know, they always say one handshake away. From also, I want to tie it to maybe a bit of European space program, the Polish space program. I know that you had a chance to speak to Mr. Znański-Wiśniewski, Polish astronaut as well. So first of all, in that line, tell us a little bit about the crew, first of all. And then secondly, also, let's segue a little bit into Poland's role in, maybe not in this mission, but potentially, generally, in future missions.
Representation-wise, I think this is also a very interesting crew because we have the first female, the first Canadian, and the first person of color going to deep space. So it's a first for a number of people representing, or let me rephrase that. I think that as children were watching Apollo and just being excited about the prospect of having just about anyone go to the moon, now they can also find pieces of themselves through the representations of the astronauts that are part of this mission. What is also exciting for the European space sector, for European audiences, is that in the future we are expected to have European astronauts also as part of the Artemis mission. Even though this is NASA's mission, I already mentioned earlier that there are elements of European collaboration in it. And for the same reason, we are expecting to see astronauts from Germany, Italy, and France in future Artemis missions, so going to the moon. You mentioned that I had a chance to meet Sławomir Znański-Wiśniewski. He was the second Pole to go to space after Mirosław Hermaszewski. He was the first Pole to go to the International Space Station. I did ask him after the announcement was made that European astronauts are going to the moon from Germany, Italy, and France. I asked, can we expect a Polish astronaut on the moon? And he said he would be honored to do it. So for now, obviously, there is no confirmation to that effect, but the willingness is there. So I think it is a promising moment for human space exploration, European and Polish.
Yeah. So, but also exactly on let's hone in on let's launch into the Polish part of all this. In the last few days, we've seen more satellites launch, actually military recon satellites, Polish ones that actually use SpaceX rocket. But give us a bit of a sense of what Poland's capability is. I mean, it's not quite NASA, but at the same time, where do you see this? I mean, you've covered this many times. Tell us a bit where Poland's potential is in all this.
Poland's potential is considerable. It is also very pronounced in the context of the European space ecosystem. When I attended the European Space Agency's ministerial in 2025, which is one of the most important meetings of the agency, it happens every 3 years. This is where ESA decides on the budget for the coming years. So many of the programs that are part of ESA's repertoire or portfolio, they have been strongly supported by Poland. the new program of the European Space Agency, European Resilience from Space. This is a program that is more focused on security, and it was strongly advocated for Poland. Even when I asked at the press conference, the ESA DG, the Director General of the European Space Agency, Josef Aschbacher, he highlighted that Poland was among the countries that really strongly advocated for that. So Poland is putting the money where the mouth is. And when it comes to the military perspective, I mean, like I said, we already have the security component through the European Space Agency, but then there are also many national perspectives here. ISI, which is producing Poland's military satellites, is producing synthetic aperture radar satellites. They have capabilities to see regardless of weather conditions, regardless of whether it is day or night, which of course enhances anyone's security and defense capabilities. They also have extremely high resolution, 25 centimeters per pixel. So with that, you can see a tank, you can see another military vehicle, and of course that in and of itself enhances your defense.
And that's Polish technology.
It is Polish technology. It's a Polish-Finnish company, and ISI has also played, and I think it is of value to highlight this and to kind of give people an understanding as to what exactly it is. ISI has been collaborating with Ukraine, and the company says it estimates that as much as 70% of the satellite imagery used by Ukraine may be coming from ISI satellites. But it also shows how strongly potentially dependent Ukraine is on these capabilities, and they really are enhancing its resilience throughout the war.
Yeah, and it's, I think, something like Poland, 734 million euros committed to ESA over the next few years, so there's still a lot more to develop, but it's exciting. Lots of companies in this space, in outer space, and thank you for joining us here. Sonja Agata Bišćan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.